was in that one. Moving on to Man United against Tottenham, probably the biggest game of the weekend. 4:30 kickoff on Sunday at Old Trafford. The two teams are currently only separated by goal difference. Man United most recently played out a 0-0 stalemate against Palace, in which Lisandro Martinez was very lucky to stay on. So he'll come into this game, he'll probably start. Um, but I think for United on the whole, they've been a much improved side and deserve a lot of credit, especially Ten Hag. I think he was very quick to sort of get his criticism last season, but he has improved. He has improved a lot. I think that's reflected more in the underlying numbers than actual results. So I think a sort of regression is due for them, and we will talk about that more in a bit. For Spurs, they recently eased past a depleted Brentford side after conceding with the first shot of the game. I thought they looked really, really solid going forward. They created 3.52 XG. They were, as expected, totally dominant in that game. Seven big chances, and in all honesty, should have been a lot more. Solanke scored, but he missed three big chances, so massively involved in the attacking third. Um, on the injury report, it's a sort of similar story as Newcastle for Spurs, in the sense that they've got players returning from injury as opposed to getting injured, so they're almost at a full contingent. It's only really Richarlison and Odegaard on the injury report, so nothing too major for them, nothing they can't really deal with. Solanke returned from injury. He was on the injury list, but he returned in the last game, played 88 minutes. He hasn't really looked fully up to speed, but he's had a sort of enough time to recover. He played 88 minutes against Brentford, so you would imagine his sort of fitness levels are as high as it could be. First angle for me is in regards to Solanke, actually, and it's for him to have two shots and one shot on target, which is priced at 1.8 with Bet365. Ideally, it's probably best to wait for the Carabao game this evening to see how Spurs might line up, but I've made the assumption that Solanke either doesn't play or is substituted early in sort of preparation for this game. With Richarlison being out, don't really see the need to risk him, especially as Spurs are massive, massive favourites. So I've assumed that Solanke starts against Man United, and we haven't really seen much of him in a Spurs shirt, so that's something to consider in the sense that it's a very small sample size. But the sort of main focus is the system that he plays in, and I think it sort of caters to his strengths. And you can sort of make the analogy between Solanke for Spurs and Artem Dovbyk of Girona last season. I think you could draw a lot of parallels between the two because the Girona system sort of relied on Dovbyk to not contribute at all in terms of creating chances. It was just to play on the shoulder, get into good high XG positions, and score goals. And I think Solanke's playing in an identical system. He doesn't really need to sort of drop deep and link. He just has to get into good positions, stay in the box, and be ready for the shot or be ready to shoot or to receive from a cross or pass or cutback. Against Leicester, he had three shots, all three on target, perhaps to perfectly exemplify that point. The fact that when he does get a chance, he might not get too many chances, but when he does get them, it'll be of a high quality nature, and it's sort of likely that it'll be on target. He then had two shots, none on target against Arsenal, but he had good chances. The ball broke to him a few times. He was very close on a couple of occasions. Again, it's worth mentioning that Arsenal is probably the toughest matchup for shots in the league, even though Spurs did have 15. They sort of were limited to the lower XG shots, and Solanke was naturally not as involved in that respect. I think Man United are a much better matchup than Arsenal, obviously. Solanke also got his first goal against Brentford, which should fill him with confidence. And again, in that game, four shots, three big chances missed, one goal, three on target. So the nature of his chances, they're good. They're very good chances, and because of that, I'd sort of want to back his shot on target markets as opposed to shots. I think that's more interesting. And for this, I think Son is priced at 1.5 for a shot on target. But, since he's been playing left wing, he's just not really in the right positions to shoot. Looking into his data again, when he's played on the left wing, he's had exactly one shot in every game. And the one shot against Arsenal was, if I remember correctly, it was in injury time and it was from about 40 yards out. So he's just not really in the right positions. The only game he scored was when he played as the centre forward. Three shots, three on target, two goals. Again, to exemplify the fact that Spurs' system caters perfectly to provide the centre forward with chances, which in this game will hopefully be Solanke. I think this game lends itself to be quite open and chaotic at times. Both sides like to press. They'll sort of be aggressive in their approach play. And I think one of the main sort of points of interest for me is the tackles markets. Um, if we look into the FB data, we can see that Man United have made the fourth most tackles in the league so far, and Spurs rank sixth. Spurs have also drawn the fourth most tackles in the league, and Man United rank fourth. So as it stands, uh, Tottenham have the lowest PPDA value in the entire league, which again highlights how they press high, they press strongly, they don't allow their opponents to sort of settle on the ball. And I think that lends itself again to a chaotic game, which is good for backing tackles, fouls, and duels in general. Um, More on that in a bit, because for me, the second angle of interest, or not the second, sorry, the third angle of interest is for Kulusevski to draw a foul. We've obviously seen a tactical shift this season where Ange Postecoglou he doesn't play two holding midfielders. We've only seen either Bentancur or Bissouma play. I think it's likely we see Bentancur start this game because I believe Bissouma has an injury or a slight knock. So um, yeah, I believe Bentancur starts this game alongside Madison and Kulusevski in midfield. Since Kulusevski has made the shift to midfield, he's drawn a foul in 3 out of 4 starts, only failing against Brentford. But in that game, it's worth noting that Brentford again sat back really deep, looked to just kind of defend their box, and they're generally just not a very good team to back duels. They're quite passive in their approach. They don't draw many tackles, they don't make many tackles, and they don't make any fouls either. Again, being so deep, Kulusevski wasn't really in the right position to draw fouls in that game. If you think he's sort of in and around the edge of the box, getting into the box, it's not really a position where you want to concede a free kick if you're Brentford. Not really a position where you can afford to. But against Man United, that will be completely different. Obviously, Man United are at home. I think they'll see most of the ball, even though Spurs are a possession-based side. I think Man United are as well. And being at home, I think, gives them a slight advantage in this one. Um, I think naturally that puts sort of Kulusevski's average position in and around the halfway line, central zone of the pitch, as opposed to the attacking third, which is a much better place to draw fouls and to find duels. And as a sort of additional point, it's worth mentioning that Kobe Mainoo has made the most fouls for Man United this season in midfield, as he sort of adapts to a more intense pressing style. He's made 10 fouls, averaging 2 fouls per game, and has been booked 3 times. So, an interesting one there, considering he should be the sort of primary man that Kulusevski matches up against. So, 1.83 to draw a foul with Paddy Power looks a really nice price. Again, price 1.44 with Sky, which is, again, indicative of good value. Another point, it's probably worth waiting for the foul matchup, actually, because if he is to be priced to foul Kozlowski, it should be pretty decent, and I really like that matchup. So if we can get sort of 2 to 1 or thereabouts, could be one to play. So I'll keep an eye on that and be posting that uh, if it is released as a market. Another angle for me, this is quite sort of heavy lean, and it's for De Ligt to have a shot, which is currently priced at 1.83 with Bet365. So De Ligt has started 3 games this season, all league games. His first start was against Liverpool in the league, in which he was subbed after 69 minutes without taking a shot. But obviously, very, very tough matchup. First of all, because Man United only had 8 shots in total. Second, because Liverpool are a fantastic team at defending set pieces, very, very physical. So naturally, especially given that Delic didn't even finish the 90, I think we can sort of ignore that game. So after that, he had 2 shots, both on target and a goal against Southampton. And then in his most recent league game appearance, he had 3 shots, 3 on target uh, against Crystal Palace away, which is not an easy matchup, not a hard matchup either. I think if we're sort of looking at last season, Palace are a very, very tough matchup for centre back shots because they're a physical side. But since they've lost Anderson, they just don't really seem to be the same team. They look a bit vulnerable defensively, especially from set pieces. Southampton are also one of the worst teams at defending set pieces, which is sort of worth noting here. Um, so I think the Lick stats are a bit exaggerated in that sense. Again, just worth considering, worth pointing out. Um, that sort of explains why his numbers are a bit high. But Spurs also sort of fall into that category of being a team that are poor at defending set pieces. And I mentioned it last week against Brentford. Obviously, it didn't pay off, but that doesn't mean it was a bad value bet. Still think it was a great find. I think it should have been shorter than it was. And this price is another one that stands out. I'm happy to sort of go for it again because the research still applies. Um, so the data looks good. Tottenham are are a good matchup to target shots, and that's because if we sort of think into that, their predicted 11, only really Christian Romero is a player who is sort of physical, is aggressive. I think, especially because Spurs don't play two defensive midfielders. They are just generally quite a small and not a very physical side. And I think that is something that Man United could look to take advantage of. Brentford in the last game against Spurs only had 4 corners, so there maybe wasn't enough opportunities in that game. But at Old Trafford, I think there should be plenty more than we saw Brentford have. Um, and it's also quite sort of interesting that all of his 5 shots have been on target. So if we have a look into what the market's offering, Bet365 are the top price here for shots and shots on target. So I think there is long shot potential. If one shot is 1.83 back ball as a single, how can we sort of play around with that, find some long shots? And I think for me, the best sort of way to approach this is to go for one shot at 1.83, shot on target at 3 to 1, 2 shots is 4 to 1, and 2 shots on target is 20 for 1 for the long shot sort of lovers. And considering it's landed in his last 2 league games, now against Spurs team who are poor from set pieces, I think the 20 to 1 long shot really does have a chance, especially in the right sort of game state. If we see Spurs take the lead into the second half, I think that's got a really, really good chance. And 20 to 1 looks pretty massive based on the circumstances. What do you think of Bruno Guimaraes to foul? Yeah. Um. What? Oh, is that a foul matchup? Because if it is, I quite like it. I'd probably lean towards the sort of less risky option of Guimaraes to commit a foul, Kovacic to be fouled, which is odds against. But if that is a foul matchup, I think it's worth a play. I think 4 to 1 is pretty decent. Can just see Kovacic being fouled by maybe Joe Linton or just someone else. But I do like that, really like that. Thank you for sharing. Final angle for me in this game um, is Spurs tackles. Obviously, I mentioned it at the start that both teams sort of press high. They have good data for tackles, but the Spurs tackle line is a bit shorter than I expected actually. So I think we can sort of look to take advantage of that. Man United have drawn 20 tackles or more in 3 out of 5 league games, with their only miss being against Brighton, in which they drew 18 tackles, and Southampton, where they drew 19 tackles. So they're going close, all going well over. So 1.72 for Spurs to make 20 tackles is a price I like. It stands out straight away. And it gets even better considering Spurs have made at least 20 tackles in 5 out of 6 in all competitions this season. They failed only against Brentford, but I've alluded to it quite a few times. Brentford play very low possession, deep block, don't see much of the ball, and they just don't incite very many duels. So we can sort of, to an extent, ignore that matchup. This one against Man United should be much better, much more evenly contested. We should see Man United have much more of the ball, and therefore tackles are a natural target. Again, we said Spurs have the lowest PPDA in the league, which basically means they're the most intense pressing team. So, as I say, tackles are just a really good option, I think, in this game. I would have expected the sort of line to be around 22 or 21. So getting this at 20 is pretty nice price and there's good value there and could potentially shorten. Final game,